Together for Democrats, the president's doing his best to tear it all apart. President Trump using all of his powers to wage an all-out assault on one of the few institutions enshrined in our Constitution, the U.S. Postal Service, and on mail-in voting itself.
They want $25 billion for the post office. Now, they need that money in order to have the post office work so it can take all of these millions and millions of ballots. But if they don't get those two items, that means you can't have universal mail-in voting because they're not equipped to have it.
Late Friday, we learned the U.S. Postal Service sent letters to 46 states warning that it cannot guarantee all mail-in ballots will arrive in time to be counted for November. The letter comes amid widespread reports of delayed mail delivery, mailboxes being snatched off street corners, and sorting machines being removed from numerous USPS locations. People want their mail, and public anger is at a tipping point, so much so that the Postal Service announced late Friday that it would stop removing mailboxes until after the election. This morning, protesters gathered outside the home of Trump's hand-picked Postmaster General, businessman Louis DeJoy, to voice their displeasure with his policies. DeJoy now faces tough questions from both sides of the aisle about why these changes are happening so close to a general election. Questions that need answers fast. Also on the president's hit list, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden's new running mate. Harris is the first black woman and the first of Indian descent to be on a major party's presidential ticket. It didn't take long for the president to go low in his attacks on Harris, pushing the racist lie that she might not be a U.S. citizen, despite the fact that she was born in Oakland, California, inventing familiar racist and sexist tropes.
You have a sort of a mad woman, I call her, because she was so angry and such hatred with Justice Kavanaugh. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. She was the angriest of the group, and they were all angry. They were all radical left angry people.
We'll pull apart that angry woman argument a little later in the show. But first, Harris and Biden are taking the opposite road, stressing that they are embarking on a historic challenge.
Joe and what we are about is about lifting people up, understanding that the strength of a leader is based on not who you beat down, but who you lift up. This is probably one of the most important elections of our lifetime. And I fear that if we don't correct course, the damage will be irreversible.
The president is lying about the security of vote by mail. In fact, he and Melania have requested and received mail-in ballots for next week's Florida primary. He's lying about Harris's eligibility. And while we've witnessed this president lie repeatedly for the past 4 years, those lies are being augmented by something very, very real, cuts to the very institution that many Americans rely on for their prescription drugs, their veterans benefits, and their right to participate in our democracy. Let's bring in Christina Greer, Associate Professor of Political Science at Fordham University, Jason Johnson, contributor at The Grio and also an MSNBC contributor, and Aaron Haynes, editor-at-large at The 19th and an MSNBC contributor. Great to see you all. You know, Jason, I was so struck in the foreword for Michael Cohen's new book. He describes Trump in this way: doing anything, and I mean anything to win, has always been his business model and way of life. When you look at these two separate threats, the threats to the Postal Service, the lies he's telling about Senator Kamala Harris, it would seem it all comes from the same playbook.
Yeah, and usually that playbook ends up in failure. We hope that's the case this time, but we don't know, because there have to be a massive amount of resources put into play in order to save this election. Look, I went and researched a lot of this throughout the week. The first step to possibly stop DeJoy from doing what he's doing with the post office would be to go to the Board of Governors, who are 9 members who control the post office. Unfortunately, 9 of them were all appointed by Donald Trump, so we can't get rid of them. A lot of them were blocked during Obama's late years in office. So what's the other option? The option would be for Democrats to get as much money as possible into the hands of local postmasters in regional areas to pay for overtime and those kinds of issues. We don't know if that's possible, because Mitch McConnell said, basically, I'm done, deuces, and I'm out of here, and he doesn't want to come up with an updated CARES Act to provide funding. So this is going to be a huge challenge. This is exactly what Donald Trump wants. And as I've said before, this is not chaos. It's not an accident. It's not a kerfuffle. The president is trying to steal the election, and it's up to the Democrats in Congress right now to stop every other government function they can until they get the post office fixed, because it's the single most important way that we can remove Donald Trump by the election in November.
And Christina, continuing to repeat these talking points is part of the Trump playbook. In fact, he was just talking about mail-in voting at a press briefing. Take a listen.
Absentee voting is great. You request, I'm an absentee voter because I requested, I got, and then I sent in my vote. So that works out very well. That's what we've had. But now they want to send in millions and millions of ballots. And you see what's happening. They're being lost. They're being discarded. They're finding them in piles. It's going to be a catastrophe.
Christina, you hear him there repeating. I mean, he does not know the difference between mail-in voting and absentee voting. You see him continuing to get this all very confused. You hear what Jason Johnson said about the fact that Jason believes he is actually trying to steal an election. I wonder if you agree with Jason's analysis.
I absolutely agree with my colleague. And I mean, this is the time where we actually need to see the UN come in, because we have done this. We've gone to other countries when we've seen this type of authoritarian regime come in and try and change the course of an election. And Donald Trump is absolutely doing that, not just defunding, not just putting in a kleptocracy, quite honestly, in so many areas of his administration. But this is something where we also have to think about a 2020 version of Souls to the Polls, because the president has already corroded his supporters' belief in the media, and now he's trying to corrode their belief in a free and fair election. And so we're going to need people who do have the resources to actually submit their ballots in person if they can, because we know that the president will consistently try to defund the USPS in the months leading up to the election. He said as much, and we're now seeing that he's doing as much as well.
Christina, I also want to stick with you, though, for a second, because in addition, you now have the Trump campaign talking about legal battles, about potentially suing states like Iowa. How do you think this then plays out on the legal front?
Well, we know the president likes to be a bit litigious because he's trying to hold down the process. I mean, the issue is this. On November 3rd, we need to sort of set up the frame that we very well may not know who the winner of the election is. And Donald Trump is trying to set the stage to say, if we don't have a winner, that is, if I am not the winner on November 3rd, then the election is completely illegitimate. Now, he's setting that up because he knows he has failed the American people. We have over 160,000 American dead. We have over 40 million unemployed, and that number is counting and growing by the day. Similarly, with COVID crisis, we know that he has failed the American people, and especially American parents who don't know where they're going to put their children. So he knows that November 3rd most likely not look good for him, and he may go down as one of the greatest failures in the latter 20th century, early 21st century presidents. So he wants to make sure that if we don't have a definitive winner, which is him on November 3rd, then the entire election has been a fraud. So he's doing that not just through the Postal Service, by creating the narrative in the media such that his supporters will not believe any election results on the evening of November 3rd or the weeks after that. So this is why it's so dangerous, because it's a perfect storm and a confluence of media, politics, and also funding of great institutions that have been around and are stated in the Constitution.
Aaron, I want you to take a listen to what former President Barack Obama had to say about what Trump is doing. Take a listen.
What we've never seen before is a president say, I'm going to try to actively kneecap the Postal Service to encourage voting, and I will be explicit about the reason I'm doing it.
Yeah.
That's sort of unheard of. If you're in a state where you have the option to vote early, you need to do that now, because the more votes are in early, the less likely you're going to see a last-minute crunch.
Aaron, is there the possibility that this entire strategy backfires?
I think that the possibility is that this could galvanize the Democrats to participate. In my interview with Senator Harris yesterday, she talked about jumping over any and all obstacles to the ballot box in November, even as these efforts at voter suppression and depression are underway. Christina mentioned Souls to the Polls. I mean, I'm talking to several black churches that are saying, yes, we're getting PPE ready for people who may have to stand in line to cast their ballot. For people like you said, we're 80 days out, and for people who, are already hearing that their ballot may not arrive, in time for Election Day, that's a lot of time once early voting gets underway for people to mail in their ballot, to not, wait until a week before Election Day to mail that ballot back in because it may not make it in time, and then it may not be counted, and then they would be disenfranchised. Look, I think that even as you have voting rights activists and advocates kind of pushing through legal channels and other means to change laws or address the infrastructure that will need to be in place for people to vote safely and participate fully in this democracy, there is also the reality that many people are raising that people are going to have to, do what they have to do to go to the polls despite the challenges to the ballot box that are being put up by those who would want to see this vote possibly suppressed and depressed in November.
Jason, there are the attacks on the Postal Service, and then there are the attacks on Kamala Harris. We know that she is eligible to run for vice president. President Trump, when he was just at that briefing, was pushed on it, and he would not answer unequivocally when asked to remove all confusion about Harris's eligibility to run for vice president. Asked plainly, is she eligible? Trump responded, I just told you I've not gone into it in great detail. If she has a problem, you would have thought she would have been vetted. And then more on Kamala Harris pressed repeatedly to clear up her eligibility. He said, don't tell me what I know. Let me put it differently. To me, it doesn't bother me at all. I don't know about it. I read one article. The lawyer happens to be a brilliant lawyer. Jason, I mean, he's just continuing to sow this element of confusion, right?
Yeah, well, and here's the thing, and this is important, Alicia. It's only confusion if press corps people ask him dumb questions. And forgive me for putting it, but why are we asking Donald Trump about whether or not Senator Harris is eligible to run for president? This guy isn't a constitutional scholar. He's not smarter than a fifth grader. He's not even the person that you ask. No one has ever doubted where Senator Harris is from. You've got pictures. You've got evidence. So to the degree that we give President Trump the runway to lie, it creates confusion that heretofore did not exist. The fact of the matter is, Senator Harris is the current VP nominee for the Democratic Party. Donald Trump can't win an open and fair election. Anybody asking him any question other than what time it is opening the door for a ridiculous lie. And quite frankly, if you ask him what time it is, you should still check your watch.
Erin, you were speaking with Senator Harris, her first interview since being named as former Vice President Biden's running mate. It would seem that their strategy is to not engage at all in this line of attack.
That's absolutely right. And I think, you've seen Joe Biden really staying on message, focusing on the pandemic, how that is disproportionately affecting marginalized communities, what he's going to do to address the pandemic on day one if he's elected. And you saw Senator Harris, when she made her debut this week, really staying on message, not really addressing the attacks, the racial and gendered attacks on her that have been coming from the other side. So, I think in that way, they seem to already have that kind of simpatico relationship that Joe Biden said that he was looking for, because they are not, trying to add to the many distractions that Americans already face with the pandemic, trying to figure out how they're going to vote, trying to figure out how their children are going to get to school or not, trying to figure out how they survive in this economy, trying to figure out if they're going to be able to make the rent or buy groceries. Those are the things that this campaign seems to be focused on, and not really engaging in the attacks that the Trump campaign attempts to cast on either of them.
Christina, Jason, and Erin, thank you all for spending some time with us. President Trump lashing out at VP